Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Gray Matter live stream. Well, have you heard of something called the Black Hats Gang? We are not a criminal, nefarious organization. We are instead, according to Grok, which is the AI program for this platform, what we are is an interested grassroots political influence group which has been working very hard to collaborate with government, the Alberta government, to bring into reality a new Alberta Bill of Rights. And it looks as though it's very close to coming to fruition based upon recent announcements by Premier Smith. We want to talk about that today. We're also going to talk about the Alberta pension plan and also something near and dear to the hearts of many Albertans, and that is the situation of gun rights and how those tie into especially the Alberta Bill of Rights, but also other things that are of importance to Albertans. So we have on the show today Shawna Sundal, who is the executive director of the Alberta Parental Rights Project. Hopefully I got that right. She'll correct me. And also Mitch Sylvestre, who is, I would describe as an all-purpose political activist. He is the sort of spearheading the Alberta pension plan referendum movement. He's been traveling all over Alberta for several months now, telling Albertans why we need an Alberta pension plan. He's also a very outspoken advocate for Alberta gun rights, and he's part of the Black Hats, as is Shawna. So they're here today with me on this live stream to talk about some things that are of importance to not only Albertans, but really all Canadians. So welcome, Mitch and Shawna, to the program.
Thank you.
So I want to start with this. Now, we're living in a country where people are in Toronto and elsewhere burning our flag and screaming death to Canada. We're living in a country where over 400 churches have been burned down since COVID. And people wonder why we need a Bill of Rights. So maybe I'll start with you, Mitch. What's the importance of an Alberta Bill of Rights? Why do we need this? Why is it important?
Well, I think it's important because I think what we need to do as a first step towards making things better is I think that we have to actually know the rules and set the rules so that everybody can do better than what we did in the last 3 or 4 years. I think that when the emergency was called, I think we lost all of our rights, basically, and the government unashamedly went ahead and did that based on what they thought was an emergency. And so as a consequence to that, I think it's put us in this position. And actually, we have another problem, a much bigger problem, I think, is that the federal government is basically attacking Alberta and Albertans in every way that I think they can conceive. They're coming after us with censorship bills. They're coming after us with gun confiscation bills. They're coming after us with, they're constantly stealing money from Canadians. And actually now the parliament has stopped because they're actually investigating this. I was at a conference on Saturday where a lady reporter was asked what she was going to be doing for her next year's project. And what she replied was, I'm going to spend the full year cataloging Justin Trudeau's missteps and ethics violations.
That's going to take a lot longer than a year, Mitch.
Well, and that's exactly what she said. She said she's going to take a whole year to do that. So that's the situation we're in. The situation we're in is something that we've never, ever seen before, in my lifetime for sure. Mm-hmm. So I think that everybody should treat it like the emergency that it actually is, and that we should actually look at steps to remedy what's dropping on us and making things better as soon as we can.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that is being attacked in our country and in our province, Shawna, are parental rights. And one of the most controversial things that the UCP government under Danielle Smith has done is to legislate things like, for example, the availability of gender transition surgeries or gender affirming care for people under the age of 18. But you think that's not enough, that there's much more that needs to be done in order to protect parental rights. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Thanks, Leighton. My organization is called the Irreplaceable Parent Project, and that's because we believe that parents are irreplaceable. And so what I believe is that the government needs to take this opportunity to include parental rights in the Alberta Bill of Rights revisions that they're working on now, because there needs to be a baseline acknowledgement of parental rights. They need to be acknowledged instead of granted. If parental rights are granted, they'll forever be on the chopping block. And whenever the wind changes or government changes, it'll be up for grabs. But if government were brave enough to acknowledge that parental rights precede government, we could acknowledge their job is to help protect them, and we could turn our attention to those who are interfering in the family unnecessarily. That doesn't mean that we think that all families are perfect. There's still room for intervention as needed, but there needs to be a backbone to the other issue-driven policies that the government's looked at, and just provide that fundamental basis for parental rights in the Alberta Bill of Rights that they're going to table at the end of the month.
Mm-hmm. Why is it, do you think, that governments want to muscle parents out of the parent-child relationship? Why are we talking about whose children these are? Why do we hear politicians talking about our children when they don't actually have any of their own children?
Yes, because children are the future, and the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, right? I mean, these little pithy sayings are based in truth. The family unit is the building block of society, and it is actually the smallest form of government. And so when a larger government wants to replace or influence a smaller government, it can often be seen as heavy-handed. And we can see that with the federal government in Alberta, as you were just talking about. The same thing can be true with any government and the family unit. And so by acknowledging that parental rights precede government, it's a truthful and courageous statement to make, and really needs to be embedded in something as significant as the Alberta Bill of Rights.
So, Mitch, just taking a step back, and I know that you weren't necessarily one of the founders of the Black Hat Gang, but you've been there longer than I have. Your hat is older than mine. Let's put it that way. What's the origin story of the Black Hats? Some of the members are not here. I know they've been doing many media appearances with you. What's the origin story of the Black Hats? You want to share that with people who are listening in?
A couple of years ago, 16, 18 months ago, we were drafting resolutions for the UCP AGM. So one of the resolutions that we were drafting for the UCP AGM was a new Alberta Bill of Rights. And we thought that at the time, based on all the things that were happening, that we needed a little help in that area. So my CA board put in a resolution to draft a new Alberta Bill of Rights, and so did Brooks Medicine Hat. So Brooks Medicine Hat CA reached out to me and said, hey, there's two of us that want the same thing. So what we would like to do is work collaboratively with you. So as it turns out, the Brooks Medicine Hat guys are policy people, and they basically wrote the Alberta Bill of Rights and used us to support them, us meaning Bonnyville Cold Lake CA board, to support them. And what we did was we decided that we would each have our own roles, and my role was to promote it, bring it to government, and try to get it on the floor, which has happened. So, so basically, my role in that was I actually recommended Leighton and Shawna to the committee, which we actually thought were very strong, capable people to make this even a more viable document than it was. And then my role was to take it to government and see if they would help us out, and they did. The boys are also on the Premier's CA board, so the Premier was aware of this early in the process. She assigned an MLA to us, MLA Stefan from Red Deer, and he helped us along the way to develop this Bill of Rights, and we're hoping that, in the end, that it's going to be a very strong, much improved Bill of Rights that will help protect Albertans' rights and freedoms. We also believe that this is pretty nonpartisan because I think there's not much on that parchment that every Albertan doesn't want or need.
Mm-hmm. And one of the key parts of this, called the Black Hat Gang, is that it really is an invitation to every Albertan to get involved in politics at the grassroots level. And it really is a success story in terms of showing people who might feel as though they're powerless, as though they're out of the game, they have no say in things, that actually if they get involved, that they get organized, and they get some good ideas, that there still are ways to influence the political process, isn't there? That's one of the key features of the things to take away from the Black Hat Gang and the Alberta Bill of Rights, isn't it?
So the thing with the Black Hats, let me go backwards there. So when I did it, I had never met the Scott and the boys and Ian and the boys from the Brooks Medicine Hat CA. So they said that they would be wearing black hats at the AGM last year, and I could find them because they would be wearing black cowboy hats. Mm-hmm. And then when actually CBC got a hold of our Bill of Rights, they had a picture of us wearing black hats, and that's basically what launched this. So what's happened since then is the NFA has picked this up and has been pushing this for us as well, because the right to bear arms is the fifth resolution or part of this Bill of Rights. So they've been kind of promoting the black hats, and what's happened is that a lot of people are picking up the fact that this is a symbol of a grassroots movement. So grassroots movement is exactly what this is. So this Bill of Rights came from the people. There's no government involvement except we shared it after it was done with MLA Stefan, and spent the afternoon showing it to him and asking for his comments and what he thought we could do to improve it. But actually, it changed very little from the original presentation. So what can you do to get involved in politics and help out? Well, I think if everybody shows up, we can do a remarkable amount of things. So, going back to the NFA, there's 350,000 gun owners in Alberta. 360,000 now, actually.
That number would shock a lot of people, I think.
So yeah, and that's legal gun owners. That's with registered licensed gun owners. So what we have there, all by itself, is probably one of the strongest political groups in the province, if not the strongest political group in the province, if they decide to all join together and have a united voice. So that was part of our deal with the NFA, is to try and gather this large group. There's actually 2.4 to 2.6 million gun owners in Canada. Again, a very, very powerful group. And registered legal gun owners are not a menace to society. In actual fact, I learned a stat the other day that quite intrigued me. That people with gun licenses are 3 times less likely to commit a murder than the average Canadian citizen.
Incredible. And
really,
I'm not a gun owner, as you know, but I'm a proponent of gun rights, and I'll explain why in a moment. But what you just said, those numbers in themselves are a very strong argument for the lack of a need for any form of gun control. I mean, we have 2.6 million gun owners in Canada. If we had a problem with gun ownership, if owning a gun made someone dangerous, this country would be unlivable. We wouldn't be able to walk the streets. I mean, the sheer number of gun owners in Alberta and in the rest of the country is in and of itself a statistical argument against the need for any form of gun control, certainly any form of gun confiscation. It seems to me that Canadians, by the numbers, are law-abiding people who have no interest in shooting each other. Fair enough?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the other thing. Those are registered legal gun owners. There's people that have expired PALs. There's people that have, a PAL is a gun license. There's people that have expired PALs that haven't renewed, that could be part of that number. And what's also represented there are spouses and kids that, live the lifestyle and understand guns. So that becomes quite a bit bigger number than 2.4 or 2.6 million nationally. Mm-hmm. And also in Alberta. As far as I'm concerned, it represents 30 or 35% of the actual vote. Mm-hmm. So that's a big group. And you're right. I mean, I've had a gun all my life and nobody would know it.
Mm.
Right? Interestingly enough, parents are an even greater voting population than gun rights.
Well, Shawna,
most parents aren't a menace either.
Yeah.
There's always the exception, but we really want to have laws that are based on the majority and allow us to address the minority that abuses, their interests or their rights and
So,
responsibilities.
Shawna, let me ask you this. So, this group of which I'm a part, we submitted a statement of 22 basic freedoms to be included in this document.
Yeah.
And that went to the government of Alberta some time ago. What's the danger in just sort of leaving it up to government? What's the danger in that you see?
Well, I mean, the truth is, it is up to government to create the law. This is why the Black Hats have created a proposal. It's
Mhm.
not a done deal. It was presented to the government in a way that was meant to help them as they deliberated this change and took into account the Manning report,
Mhm.
which the government commissioned. So, I think it's been respectfully handled. My area, of course, is parental rights. And I think that the place we're at now is really saying we've done this work and it is a grassroots success story. It's not been any kind of backroom dealings or special interests. It's really just people that belong to constituency associations getting together, doing the work, and being able to make those presentations. Since that has happened, really, we are trying to say it is the government that has to take into account the will of the people. And the other thing that I think is a very important point to get out right now is that we don't have a dictatorship. This isn't a single person's decision. This will be a decision by the caucus, and every MLA is going to have to offer an explanation to their constituencies whether or not they supported the items in this bill, like parental rights.
Mhm.
And I want them to understand, like, we're here to support them. It's a valid question, and saying no isn't really in the best interests of any of the families that they represent.
Shauna, I've heard you speak on a topic that I think is important. I'd like you to explain for the audience here, and that is there's a distinction and a blurring of the distinction between parental rights and rights of the child. And oftentimes, what governments will do is they'll prey upon this, and they'll play upon this in order to actually set children against their parents. One example being, a law that was passed by the NDP, which said that children at school who disclose some change in their gender status, that change in status could not be disclosed to their parents. So you want to touch on this important distinction between parental rights, which is what you're talking about, and rights of the child, because it seems to me that these get mixed up often, especially by the media and government.
Yes, thank you, Leighton, for the opportunity to address that. I think that the language of child's rights has really been utilized and um, uh, made public language by the left. And really, the first fundamental right of a child is to have a parent who has rights to protect them.
Hmm.
If a parent doesn't have parental rights, they cannot take care of their child. And a family is in the best interest of the child. It's not an easy thing when government removes a child from their family home, right? And so we need to tread with caution when there's interference in a family. So, while we have seen this idea that children belong to the community, this is a false premise. When people use language like, it takes a village to raise a child, it does not. That is the parent's job. What happens when you disagree with the village? Or, even more importantly now, what happens when the village disagrees with you? You are
Hmm.
the parent, you have a significant and unique role, and it is not something that is duplicated by others, right?
Hmm.
Even, I have great respect for foster families and people who adopt children. Obviously, you are taking on the responsibility of someone else in order to care for the child, and that is significant and of grave importance. But when you look at the language, right, a foster parent, a step parent, right, an adoptive parent, All of these do, in true language, give indication that you are replacing that irreplaceable parent. And that's why so many kids, want that information later in life, just to kind of ground them. It's not that they haven't been brought up well, but family is important. So, yeah, the government's job is not to raise our children. It's our job.
And having a Bill of Rights in place which protects those parental rights is a key feature of that. It supports that endeavor. Mitch, I want to come back to you for a moment here. We have a very important political event coming up in this province in November. I believe it's the 2nd of November. It's not the U.S. presidential election. It's actually the annual general meeting of the UCP, of the party. And this bill, this Alberta Bill of Rights, is going to be talked about there and also voted upon. You want to talk about that and also the broader importance of the AGM and why people should attend?
So the AGM gives every individual Albertan a chance to vote on resolutions that will or possibly could be made law. And so every time that we go to an AGM, you will be there when they debate them. They debate the resolutions. There'll be 30 resolutions on the floor. So you will actually have a voice, depending on how many people there are there. This particular year, there's going to be possibly 6,000 people at this AGM.
Just incredible. That sounds like a record number. Is that abnormally high?
It's absolutely the biggest political convention in the history of Canada. And actually last year's was also the biggest number that they had ever had. So what we're talking about now is we're seeing people participate. AGMs used to hold 1,000 people, and that's the most. Now we hear in media sometimes they say, well, it's only the fringe people or the people on the far right that show up to the AGM for the UCP party. But however, the whole party has the opportunity to show up to the AGM. So as far as I'm concerned, it'll belong to the people that show up. So if you show up and vote and make your voice heard, well, then you can definitely make a difference. And you'll influence the way the government sees policy and what they're actually going to do. If you have a unanimous vote with 5,500 or 5,800 people in the room, I don't think the message is mixed. I think the government has to understand that is the actual will of the people. And, to hear me say, talk about the will of the people, that goes back to my history. I've never been political. So for me to talk like that sounds like I've been involved with this for a long time. But no, this is only my second 2.5 years that I've been involved here, my third AGM. And the first one I went to was remarkable because we brought so many people there that were angry at that particular time. It was 1,600 people. And they weren't even set up so they could do the election properly. And the running joke amongst us was the UCP can't even run an election. So at the time, we thought that was kind of funny. But at the time, we went in there, made our voices heard, voted for the people that we thought would represent us well, and put some of our people on the UCP board. And we continue to do that. So what's happening is when you show up at the AGM, you have the opportunity to vote people onto the board that represent what you think is important. And you have an opportunity to form and to vote on resolutions. Like that's how this Bill of Rights started. We went to the AGM, we saw that we could put resolutions in. We created a resolution. We put them on the floor. They got voted on. In actual fact, 2 or 3 of the resolutions that our board put in are actually highlighted in this Bill of Rights, including freedom of expression and bodily autonomy, and this one, the Bill of Rights. So that was done in Bonnyville, in a small town of Bonnyville. So I'm just saying.
Yeah. One of the things we can be assured of is there won't be any flag burnings at the AGM. But one of the things that is happening, and this is very much in the news, is that there will be a leadership review for our Premier Smith. It was in the news today that her chief of staff is stepping down, Mr. Marshall, and that he's going to be replaced by Rob Anderson, who is best known for his work with the Alberta First movement. Do you think that this is going to signal an important policy shift within the Premier's office, or do you think this is sort of status quo?
I think this is status quo. I think Rob Anderson's been there in the background from the very start. Rob was with the premier back in the those days. She trusts him, and I mean, of course, to have her chief of staff, I think that would be very important. So no, I don't think there's going to be much change there. Patrick Malkin's been moved in as the assistant to Rob, and you know, I mean, he was one of the original CAs that put forth the motion of the 22 to get Kenny fired. So he's a freedom-oriented person. So you know, I mean, that will get Freedom People's opinions probably more front and center and heard than what was there when Marshall was there. So yeah, maybe there will be some kind of a shift, but for the most part, I think it's pretty much status quo.
There's talk that a large contingent is going to show up at the AGM to try and force a change in leadership. Do you anticipate that that's going to unfold, or is that a lot of smoke and mirrors, in your opinion?
Well, I really think it's going to unfold. I don't think I know it's going to unfold. I don't even think it's going to unfold. I know it's going to unfold. They've done a lot of work. They spent a lot of money trying to get people to the AGM to vote against the premier, based on the fact that they're not happy with the speed at which she's moving. However, I think we have to be cautious there. In my personal opinion, I think that we have a premier that's taken the bull by the horns here and put this Bill of Rights out there and put a lot of things in it that are that you know are pretty hard conversations for a lot of people. I think she's taken. She's proclaiming herself as the most freedom-thinking premier in Canada, which gives us, and she's giving us a voice. So I think that's pretty important. I don't think that we've seen this level of cooperation with the premier in the past, not since I've been involved. So I think Conservatives have to be very careful that they don't get perceived as a group of people that can't make up their mind who's going to lead them. I think as far as this AGM is concerned, I think we have to be very careful with exactly what we're doing and the message we're sending to the people of Alberta. I think that status quo, as far as I'm personally concerned right now, would be the best thing. So we're working very hard to counter that movement. And we're personally, from Bonnyville, going to bring 300 people to the AGM. And I think a large majority of them are going to vote for the premier to keep her there. Now, this premier has showed us that she will stand up to Ottawa. She's done it multiple times, continues to do it. And I think that she's going to be hard to replace right now. And my big concern is if we do replace her, what happens that will be a year and a half down the road before we get another leader who's, you know, probably in place. And then the problem with that is that we're going to be into the next election cycle and we'll have wasted these 4 years. So, you know, I think we have to be very cautious on who we vote for. You know, I really think that the status quo for as far as I'm concerned right now would be the best.
So, Shawna, why should parents buy a ticket and buy a membership in the party and show up at the AGM to vote on this Bill of Rights? Why should they do that?
Well, I know we both love quotes, Leighton. And I was looking in the comments that Shelley asked the question, why does a parent need confirmation from a government to parent their child?
Great
and
question.
The quote that came to mind, is a good question because it's all about language. The quote that came to mind was Hercules. He said, just because you don't take an interest in politics doesn't mean that politics won't take an interest in you. So while we have had parental rights, it used to be so well understood, just like being able to breathe. You know, it needs shoring up because of how things have unfolded in the courts. People like to refer to the 1985 Supreme Court decision that, you know, supported parental rights. People don't always know in 2022, they said biology is irrelevant. So this is why the Irreplaceable Parent Project exists, is to do the work of letting people know what's happening around their parental rights and to talk to government about it. And Mitch is absolutely right. If you show up, you have a voice. And parents are busy. They can't do that every day. So that's why I do what I do on behalf of them. But they need to show up when it's time to write an email or attend a meeting like the UCP AGM. It's a wonderful opportunity to show that you're paying attention and you're interested in the outcome. And as I mentioned before, you need to be talking to your MLA because they are your local elected representative and they have a voice in saying whether or not your parental rights will be included. So
Mhm.
please do act in some way, whether it's municipally, right? Your school board, becoming part of your CA in your local political group, attending things like the AGM. When we are active, we have a voice. And when we're passive, we don't.
One of the questions that a lot of people ask about the Bill of Rights is how does it relate to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms? And no, isn't this something that the federal government can just sort of take out its eraser and scratch out? So I'm going to put on my lawyer hat for a second, provide a bit of an explanation about this, and then ask the two of you to comment. So as I see it, the Alberta government might view the Trudeau Liberals or the Nenshi NDP as sort of its chief threats, but I think that this is wrongheaded. Jason Kenney was made to resign because he violated a basic rule of governance that was set down by Machiavelli centuries ago in an essay he wrote called The Prince. And this is that the populace will always reject a ruler who is seen to have become so powerful that they intrude into the basic privacy of individuals and their families. And we're seeing that unfold right now with Justin Trudeau and his record unpopularity. It's so bad that at this point it looks as though the entire Liberal Party is going to go to seed, and God willing, they shall. Although counterintuitive, it's smaller government which respects the individual, places trust in communities, and makes them responsible to each other that is in fact peaceful. And this has been true throughout time. Conversely, expanding government has the exact opposite effect, resulting in the vilification we see every day. Across the ocean in Great Britain, we see the civil unrest and the violence that results from a technocratic surveillance state so drunk with its own power that it has lost any sense of who they govern or why they're doing it. So, this new Bill of Rights is a means by which the UCP government can express respect for individual Albertans, their personal property, and for the rule of law. A government which places limits upon its own authority, and that's really what it's doing here, virtually assures the loyalty of the governed, of us. The recognition of personal property in the Bill of Rights is also a very key expression of sovereignty for Alberta, sovereignty, which is something this government has been talking about from day one. In my opinion, the best approach which this government could take in response to federal government encroachment is to legislatively expand the scope of Section 9213. This is the exclusive jurisdiction over property and civil rights. Intuitively and legally, there's little in society or governance falling outside the scope of property and civil rights. When I go out and I speak to people, I challenge them. Tell me one thing about your relationship with government that it does not come under the umbrella of property and civil rights. It's literally universal. Even the criminal code, people ask me about the criminal code. Even the criminal code is filled with offenses which presume the existence of personal property rights. So it's therefore open to the UCP government to legislatively expand its Section 92 powers in much the same way that the Liberal government has made its environmental jurisdiction, for example, a means of legislating just about everything under the sun, pardon the pun. And this includes natural resources, education, policing, municipalities, natural resources, and even healthcare, which are all exclusive provincial jurisdictions. So, as the Premier has stated publicly and quite correctly, uh, Canada is a federation of sovereign states. We don't have a national government. The new Bill of Rights is an important statement of this government's resolve to treat Albertans with due respect for individual human rights and civil liberties, which also protects us from federal government overreach, which poses an existential threat to our province, its wealth, its prosperity, and most of all, its fundamental values. I just want to finish off on one point because when we talk about gun control, for example, people always confront me with, that the federal government has jurisdiction over firearms. This is in fact not true. It is not. It is not in Section 91 of the Constitution or anywhere else in the Constitution that the federal government has exclusive authority over firearms. In fact, it's more proper to say that the provinces should have exclusive authority over firearms because a firearm is nothing other than a species of personal property. And clearly, personal property is in the exclusive jurisdiction of the provinces. So what we have with firearms is a classical example, maybe even the perfect example of federal government overreach. Under Section 9127 of the Constitution, the federal government has exclusive authority over criminal code offenses. And what they've done is they've taken the power to impose firearms bans on people who commit crimes, especially crimes involving firearms. They've expanded that to as a universal authority to legislate every single gun owner in Canada, and that's simply not provided for in the Constitution. And so I think that if this government, our provincial government, ever goes to court over who actually has authority over legislation of firearms, I happen to think that Alberta is going to win. So hopefully that answers a commonly asked question about, this perceived conflict between federal government jurisdiction over firearms. I think clearly firearms are, at least in dealing with firearms as property and licensing their ownership, clearly that should be within provincial jurisdiction and not federal. Unfortunately, that's not the history of what's happened in our country thus far. So I'm going on for a while. Do either of you want to comment on anything that I've said about that?
No, my only comment is that is the argument. The argument is this is under federal jurisdiction. I would like our Bill of Rights to challenge that, actually, to take that to court. I think that you're right. I think we can win this, and I think it's very important to Albertans too, because I've heard it multiple times that they're not going to. People are saying they're not going to take my guns. Mm-hmm. So there's more involved here than just a regular. This could be a line in the sand drawn by many people. The United Nations actually has said that by 2030 they want to disarm all civilian population in the world. So this is more than a Canadian thing. This is an international thing. Mm-hmm. However, I see that one of the first steps to making a population helpless is to remove firearms. Mm-hmm. If you cannot protect your property or yourself, how can you have any civil rights or any rights at all? Mm-hmm. So that is the point. That's the entire point of people owning guns. People, they dress it up like target shooters, farmers, all the rest of it. But historically speaking, people have to have a way to protect themselves from bad government. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds radical and it sounds out there, but it's actually a functioning thing that in order for society to be free, it has to have the ability to protect itself.
Mm-hmm. And the people they want to protect are their families.
Right.
That's why we want these things. I think you touched on a really important thing in your segment there too, Leighton, which was small government does win the loyalty of the people, mm-hmm. right? We need to not have an attitude where there's an inherent distrust of people with regards to their rights. We need a government that's willing to address the violations, but in other ways, let freedom reign. Mm-hmm. And so when it's parents that are the smallest form of government possible, making decisions about how to raise their family, there shouldn't be a penalty based on socioeconomic, religious, or any other factor, right? Those things are not justification for interference. People have the freedom to have different opinions, right? And that's okay in a free country like we are supposed to be living in. So I, again, would say it will take a courageous government to acknowledge parental rights instead of grant them. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a theme that's true for all of the 22 points that the Black Hats have put forward to government to consider. Mm-hmm. Trust us because most people are worthy, and limit your interference to necessity.
Mm-hmm. This is an excellent point that you bring out about a culture of trust. And it's really a defining feature, a distinctive feature of societies like Canada, the United States, and Great Britain. And that is that we're trust-based societies. Yes. And in other parts of the world, China is not a trust-based society. It never has been. But you talk about culture. Now, part of Canadian culture is a culture of responsible gun ownership. based upon the numbers that Mitch told us about earlier, which I believe he said was 2.6 million Canadian gun owners, obviously there's a longstanding and pre-existing culture of responsible gun ownership, and that children in our country are being raised with that. They're being taught responsible gun ownership, and they're passing on that tradition, and we call this culture. And so we're not just talking about gun ownership as a type of property. We're talking about gun ownership and responsible gun ownership and use of guns as an aspect of Canadian culture, which is very, very deeply embedded in our society. It goes all the way back for centuries. And then on the other side of the ledger, it's difficult, I would say impossible, to ignore the track record of societies where gun confiscation has succeeded en masse. Let's talk about the Soviet Union. Let's talk about Nazi Germany. Let's talk about Cuba. Let's talk about Maoist China. Let's talk about Venezuela. And sadly, the most recent example is our friends in Australia, who were put down during the COVID lockdowns with rubber bullets because they had no way of fighting back. So in Canada, I think what we're saying in Alberta especially, we don't want to go down that road. And the people who are out there who are like me, who are not yet gun owners, what I would say to all of you, even if you don't own a gun, even if you don't want to own a gun, you should still support gun ownership for the reasons that we're saying. Because if they can take your guns, they can take everything else. And that is what has been, gun confiscation has been the gateway for private property confiscation. And if you're paying attention, this federal government is very, very interested in confiscation of private property. We've had a Minister of Justice who fortunately isn't our Minister of Justice anymore, although his replacement is not much better. But Mr. Lametti, not so long ago, said there's no recognition of personal property rights in Canada. Well, of course, this is completely absurd. It's right in the charter. It's right in the criminal code. It's in every aspect of our law. But these guys in Ottawa are trying to convince us that we don't have the right to own anything. And they are signed on. The Prime Minister recently was before an international audience and gave a speech that no one was listening to. But he said anyway that Canadians are still dedicated to Agenda 2030, which says that we will own nothing and be happy. I don't know many Canadians who are signed on to that. I don't know many Canadians who support Justin Trudeau. There are fewer and fewer all the time. That, having said that, that's the agenda. And I think that frames importantly why this Bill of Rights is so important, not only to Albertans, but to the entire country. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Shawna. You know what? I'll let you go after this, Shawna. I want to touch on the point that you made about trust. And historically, the difference between what's going on now and what went on in my father's time was that back then the press was capable, independent, would report on government, and so the people did not have to pay attention. Mm-hmm. Today, that is not the case. Today, the press is more of a propaganda machine. It is absolutely bought by government. It absolutely represents government. And so we're in a situation that we've never, ever been in. People have to understand that situational awareness here is an issue, and people have to look around and say, look, what are all the things? Let's do this together. We have censorship bills, which we've never had. We've had a federal government that attacks our economy, step after step after step, trying to cap oil production, turning down Germany for natural gas, all the rest of that kind of stuff. So what's happening is, and we can go, what else are they trying to do? Confiscate our guns, restrict our freedoms. We've even got a problem right now that I think is nobody's paying too much attention to. What happens if Tamara Leach gets convicted of having a legal protest? So are they going to take away our right to protest? Are they going to take away our right to march and do that kind of stuff? Because that's a signal they're sending us. What we have is a prime minister who's committed basically would take a year of research to find all the ethics violations that he's done, and he's not in jail, but somebody that organizes a peaceful protest is going to go to jail for doing that very thing. So basically, the rules that are there are not being paid attention to. So this is the first step for us. We want to make the rules a little stiffer. And we want to make sure that the government is limited in its scope, because they're showing us that we cannot trust them, actually. And sorry, Shawna, for interrupting.
Yeah.
No, well, I just want to concur because Justin Trudeau has given opinions about interfering in many areas, right? June 8th,
Yes.
2023, he declared that parental rights were as a far right issue. And I'm like, it's not at all. I disagree. The actual fact is the closer that you have governance to the issue, the better governance you have, right?
Yes.
The
Very
federal
true.
government is less capable than our provincial government.
Right.
And the provincial government is less capable than a parent when it comes to parental rights. And so,
Mhm.
what we want, if we believe as conservatives that we want small government, we know that government will have limited interests and resources, and they need to choose what they spend their time on instead of having an endless budget and resources at their disposal. So, when it comes to the gun issue, maybe they should focus on the criminals instead of the law-abiding gun owners who aren't a problem, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
same thing with parents, right? Let parents parent. We can all agree that we can address exceptions, but it is not your job to make it your business to oversee the bringing up of the children, because now we've moved into this control factor that we see resulting in very negative situations. And any of us that study history know what happens, not only when guns are removed, but when the influence of parents is removed from the children, right?
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
is not
Mhm.
good.
Right.
Children
So.
are not the property of the state, and they need to be under the auspices of their families. The courts ask the question, what is in the best interest of the child? My answer is family is in the best interest of the child.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
And
if I might
go
ask
ahead.
a question here. Can I ask a question here, Shawna?
Yeah.
Shawna, what actual rights do the parents have now? So as compared to, say, what my father and mother grew up with, it was people like me, actually, I've raised 5 kids, actually think that we're the supreme rulers of our kids until they
Yeah.
turn 18 years old.
Yeah.
So has that changed? What kind of danger are we in? What are you talking about? Basically, I'm not understanding clearly what you're trying to tell us. So can the state just walk into our homes and take our kids? Or can they, what is the real danger here? Could you explain that to me, please?
Well, I think that we're seeing shifts in attitudes. Like you said before, when we were younger, right? Our families would love for us to have good relationships with lots of people in the community, at the church, at the school, right? There was no threat because parents were confident in
Mhm.
their position, right? The way the law has changed now, it says someone with a significant relationship with the child. And I'm like, that is a great equalizer. Now, all of a
Mhm.
sudden, the teacher that the child confides in can have a very weighted argument in court, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not blaming teachers, right? Good teachers probably have no idea, but others have taken advantage of this. The other thing that we've seen come to light is kind of this idea that children should be granted decision-making powers before they really come of age. And regardless of what your position is on controversial things, the brain is not fully developed until your mid 20s. The prefrontal cortex, which is your decision making part of your brain, is your mid 20s. So when states across North America have decided 18, 19, or 21 is when you're actually considered an adult, right? It's for good reason. That's still early. So when people talk about kids under our legal age being able to make decisions, you know, the premier has talked about how children can become emancipated at 16. And I'm
Mhm.
like, it's not just that easy. Children don't decide, I'd like to become emancipated. It has to be permanent, it has to be necessary, and it has to be approved by a judge on a case by case basis. And once they're deemed emancipated, that is it. They're legally responsible for themselves.
Mhm.
The idea that children at younger and younger ages can make these decisions on a very short-term basis and their parents are still responsible for them is putting us in a position of conflict. And I actually have a case on my desk where the judge and I'm going to talk about this in my next tip talk that I go around the province doing, But basically, the judge has to weigh this best interest of the child with the idea of needing guardian consent. And a lot of parents in the province don't know that they have to be upgraded to guardianship, right? That's a shocker if you go read family law. So parents have rights, and they have been long-standing, but they are being challenged, right? There are things that are happening in the courts, because the courts are activist courts, that are challenging this traditional role of the family and of parents. So one of my jobs is to try and educate people about this shifting landscape so that they can act responsibly and be aware of some of the implications of these things in their practical everyday life. And then, of course, like we have all done, working with politicians to try and improve the situation in practical ways that protects the interests of the people that we care about in our Canadian and Alberta culture here. So, it's an intertwined interest, isn't it? All of these things come together, and they really do center around respect and responsibility. True conservative government would be small, doesn't mind, the fact that there is freedom in a life to live it while still guarding and governing in a responsible way to protect the interests of the community writ large, not writ small.
One of the other pressures that's facing parents are economic factors, and a lot of the economic factors that are stressing parents are coming directly from government, and especially federal government. Excessive spending, which is leading to higher interest rates,
carbon tax,
cost of housing, carbon tax, inflation, cost of groceries, cost of education. All these things that economically could be supporting parents are actually putting economic pressure on parents, so that's making it more difficult for them to raise their children. And this brings me to our next topic. We've talked about gun rights and the Bill of Rights. We haven't talked about the other big one, the other big fish that we're trying to haul into the boat here, and that's the Alberta pension plan. So, Mitch, you've been going around the province, talking to people about this, raising awareness, trying to get people enough signatures to force a referendum on the Alberta pension plan. Tell us about the Alberta pension plan, the concept, and why you think this is important for Albertans, that we separate out from the Canada pension plan and go our own way and have our own pension plan.
Okay, so first of all, I want to explain to you why I think it's necessary. I think we touched on it before. I think we're in a power struggle with the East. I think we're in a power struggle with the federal government. So 335 billion, I'll go through the numbers with you first, and then so you understand the number part of it, and then I'll explain to you the political part of it that I think is very crucial and important to understand. So Albertans every year pay $9 billion a year to the federal government.
$9 billion?
$9 billion a year to the federal government, and Albertans get paid every year $6 billion. So all seniors collect $6 billion out of the $9 billion that Albertans pay. Albertans pay that because we're younger, work more hours, and we're basically richer than the rest of the country, which is probably tied into the fact that we work more. So the fact of the matter remains is that Alberta pays more by $3 billion a year than it collects back. The other thing is that early in the 60s or in the mid 60s, when this Canada pension plan was formed, Ontario thought that they were going to be in a bad situation because they were the richest province in Canada. So they wanted to basically draft a prenup at that point, which they did do. And what it says is that if you overcontribute, that money will go into an area that is exclusively yours, and it will be treated like it's your money so that you can come back and get it at any time in the future with the interest that it accrues. So in actual fact, that number for Alberta today is $335 billion with a B. So our demographic and population is set to continue to overcontribute, is not the right word, but I'll use it, to overcontribute for the next 25 years, based on how old our people are, how much work there is, and all the rest of it. So this is a power struggle. The federal government has the ability. They're paying us $730 or $740 a month. It's a horrible, horrible plan. We can do way better, that for sure. Just personally, I didn't have to opt in to CPP. I've calculated that I paid about $240,000 into CPP because I'm a business owner. I pay my portion, and I also pay the company's portion. So $240,000 is what I've paid in. I started collecting at 65. So it would take me literally 20 years to collect my principal. Never mind, and I could have opted out, right? So 20 years it was going to take me to collect my principal. That's basically cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of $900,000. If I had opted out of CPP when I had the opportunity to, I could have opted out right at the very beginning, invested it in any kind of a pension plan, even at 5% interest, and made a ton of money on it as compared to what's going on. So there's multiple things, like this is a complicated thing, much more complicated than that, but just understand that Alberta stands to be in a very much better position with the pension plan than the CPP is. Mm-hmm. So the fact that there are people who are going to say hands off our pension, and that brings me to another point. We've just now got a new assistant PM, Mark Carney, who said that he would like to control $50 billion of the Canada Pension Fund. So the irony of the whole thing is that they're talking to us about hands off our pension, but the first thing they do is they take control of $50 billion of this pension. So what do you think Mr. Carney is going to make? This is transferred to his own personal wealth management fund. His business.
No conflict of interest there.
No conflict of interest there at all. But how much do you think the service, how much money he's going to be made to take care of that kind of money? $500 million a year, at least.
Wow.
So that is another part of what's going on. They're blatantly telling us that we're putting our hands on the pension, but they're actually doing it. And again, further to the point, it would be much easier for us to handle this pension. We could keep an eye on it here. It's a ton of money. Put that in perspective. Alberta has $25 billion in the bank and owes $100 billion. We're talking about moving a $335 billion asset here to Alberta to control. Also, the DEI portion of the government will not invest any of that money into Alberta oil and gas, even if it's a good investment. So this would give us the opportunity to invest it in our own economy. It would give us the opportunity to hire people to manage it. We could manage it at arm's length. We could leave it at CPP if everybody wants to do that. The other part of it is that I fully believe that people should have the option to opt out. If people want to opt out, it'd be a one-time chance. If I was making the rules, and they could opt out, and it could possibly cost them $890,000 like it cost me. And I really, really believe that. So I'm just saying, Alberta pension is a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. And so I've done 60 town halls. 60 town halls. We put this in front of 10,000 people. And I am going to tell you right now that there has been less than 50 people in all of those meetings combined that thought that Alberta pension plan was not for them. And most of them were not sure when they left the meeting after they heard the facts and figures.
So, Mitch, as you say, this is a no-brainer. Clearly, Alberta has the ability to opt out of the CPP. Quebec has already done it. Why do you think that Danielle Smith and her government hasn't simply gone ahead and created an Alberta pension plan? Why have they put it to your group or to Albertans to get enough signatures to force a referendum?
Well, the rule was made. I think Kenny passed the law that said that you needed to take this to a referendum.
Okay.
And I know they could reverse it should they choose to do that. What do I think? Why? I really think that the federal government doesn't want us to do it, and neither do the federal Conservatives. Which is another example why we have to take care of our own backyard. The federal Conservatives absolutely do not want this. Like Pierre Poilievre will not want this to happen, even though it's a huge benefit to Alberta. Even though we've contributed at least that much money to basically Quebec in the last 15 years. And we continue to pay. We pay $15 billion a year to Quebec every year, not including this extra $3 billion, not including the $1 billion for EI. So, and I don't know them all. I don't know what all the over contributions are, or the total amount of money that we contribute to the rest of the country. Now, we shouldn't feel guilty about taking this back because it's actually a rule that we didn't make. Ottawa made the rule. It's our option to pull it out. just the interest on that money alone we could actually pay for a large part of our operating budget if they so choose to do that.
Mm.
Just at 5% interest, we could give our seniors an immediate 40% increase in pay, leave the principal alone, and the principal, according to CPP numbers, would double in 8 years to
Incredible.
$670 billion, which is, again, an incredible amount of money.
So,
So
how many signatures do you need on the
we need
for the
300,000 now.
petition?
We thought we needed 270, but the population of Alberta has grown. We need 10% of the voting population.
And how close are you to your goal?
Well, it's an interesting job to get that. We're about 10% the way there. We have about 30,000 signatures now. I think that we're going to, honestly, Alberta Bill of Rights has kind of stuck a wrench in the gears of Alberta pension. So after the AGM, we're going to be flat out on pension, and we're all going to focus on pension. There's a lot of people that I'm involved with, that we're involved with, that we see that the pension needs to be front and center. I don't think I think the Bill of Rights is more important than pension because it addresses more things. But I really believe that the pension is going to be a game changer for the province of Alberta.
I totally agree.
Absolutely.
It's basically the war chest for the sovereignty movement. On one view of the matter. Shawna, did you want to comment on that at all in the pension plan?
Oh, I fully support it. I mean, like you said, families are under financial pressure all the time. And the Alberta pension plan would be a game changer for Albertans, our senior population, right? Everybody. So I encourage everyone to sign up and let's get the referendum done.
Mm-hmm. And it would be a game changer for parents because they would be able to look forward to that they wouldn't have to worry so much about, saving for retirement and could spend more meaningful time with their children, spend more money on their children on not necessarily on video games, but maybe on university tuition
It just
or
opens
other
up
things.
your options.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Take some of the financial pressure off us.
Yeah, and somebody was mentioning in the comments about how they hunt and it feeds their family of 10, right? And I'm like, I know a lot of home education families that make it work on what their current budget is because they prioritize that. Mm-hmm. Money is not what people want. Money is the sideshow. Freedom is the basic currency that everybody can work and be happy under. If we have a latitude in our businesses and in our lives to create an environment that lets us be happy and succeed. That's why North America was a very successful place to be, and we're losing it. So we need to get it back. And I really appreciate all of the work and the effort that all the Black Hats have put into, just drafting the proposal was a lot of work, and promoting it, as we've all go around and talk. I know, Leighton and Mitch, you've spent a lot of time on this too, and Mitch double timing it with the pension plan, but everybody's really working together. And I hope that the rest of the people in the province, understand we're not doing anything that you can't do either. Proposing something for the government to consider is something you can do every day of the week. You just need to send an email or call the office or go in and visit them. There's nothing magical. It's work. And when a group does a bunch of work for you, and if you agree on the issues, support it, because that's the easiest way to get something done is coming together, unified in the premise and the principles that are captured. And it might not be perfect for everybody, but we need to take these steps forward so that we can accomplish the life that we want to have here in Alberta. And frankly, I think Alberta is a template for the rest of Canada to consider. We know that there's, some synergy going around with the other provinces. And, maybe I can just close off with an observation about the parental rights. While Premier Moe and Higgs have both written parental bills of rights, they've only been limited to education. And frankly, a well-done Parents' Bill of Rights has to be about the fundamental principle, not any issue. And so there's a very big distinction between things that have already been proposed and what could be done. And so I just again, would love for the government to take that courageous step and acknowledge that parental rights pre-exist. And I think the same could be said for almost the whole list of 22 that the Black Hats worked on, that these are natural, God-given, freedoms and rights that really need to be protected as a fundamental issue in our society to succeed.
That's beautifully stated. Thank you very much. And I want to thank both of you for joining us today on the live stream. I've kept you for about an hour here. I won't let you get on with the rest of what you're doing, the important work that you're doing. I want to leave you with a quotation, as we often do on Grey Matter. This one is from a famous book that was written in the 1940s by a philosopher named Ayn Rand, in a book that was called Atlas Shrugged. She said this, and it sort of captures, I think, the essence of what we're talking about in terms of the Bill of Rights and gun rights and also the pension plan. She said this: the only proper purpose of a government is to protect our rights, which means to protect us from physical violence. The only proper functions of a government are the police, to protect us from criminals, the army, to protect us from foreign invaders, and the courts, to protect our property and our contracts from breach or fraud by others, and to settle disputes by rational rules according to objective law. That's really what it's all about, folks. That's an accurate statement of what we're talking about, and that is the rule of law, and that's really what the Alberta Bill of Rights is all about. So I'd like to thank everyone for being part of this live stream. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. And if you like what you've seen and heard, please share it. It's important that we get the word out to our fellow Albertans, our fellow Canadians, about what's happening. This is an historic political movement that's happening in Alberta right now, and it's impacting every single Canadian, no matter where they live. So please, if you like what you have heard, and you want to learn more, you can contact Mitch through the Alberta Pension Plan program. You can contact us here at the program, and we'll make sure that your messages get through to the people who can answer your questions. But most of all, get involved. Get involved in your communities. Get involved in your families, in the activities that are going on in your own communities. And if you really want to have a say in what's going on in our province, for heaven's sakes, buy a membership in the UCP and buy a ticket to go to the AGM on November 2nd. You have just as much a right. That's your passport to be there, just like everyone else, including even all the way up to the Premier. So again, I want to thank Mitch Sylvestre and Shawna Sundal for being here today. And most of all, thank all of you for being here and being part of the Grey Matter live stream today.